Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Continental Soccer TV. And I guess this week is somebody that's got a great Dutch personality, like Dutch people a lot. And I want to welcome Laura Duray to the show. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, Nicholas. I'm glad to be here.
No, I'm looking forward to this, and it's funny because we always get a lot of stuff, especially in around the world, about to see more women on the show, especially the women's game, because I think the women's game is definitely growing. And having last night, obviously watched Northern Ireland and the Ukraine, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
and also been around certain Dutch players before when I was in Holland, and very 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 impressed. So this is definitely going to be great for a lot of our viewers.
cool.
Just to learn from you, learn a lot more about your background, what makes you tick, and also look at what you're currently doing now. I know we've kind of spoken about that, so
Yeah,
this is definitely going to be great. I'm just going to go through some facts, Laura, and then
sure,
anything that is not correct, I'm sure you'll definitely tell us if
for
it's a
sure,
yay or a nay, and then after
sure.
that I'll tell my guys off.
Yeah.
So Laura, so obviously from being a former Dutch women's obviously international goalkeeper, right?
Mm,
And so you're kind of your path, so kind of your early life. So you were born in Amsterdam in 1992.
mm-hmm.
Started your football career at 6 years old with Sporting Martinez.
So that's the
Um,
first correction. I was 4 years old actually. I started
oh man,
really early. I
oh
don't. Yeah,
darn it.
it's.
Okay,
I don't know if I was
four. Okay,
registered yet, but I started at 4. Yeah.
okay. And then obviously, so you grew up in Amsterdam through the 90s and the
Mm-hmm.
thousands. Um, and then obviously, I know obviously our audience we have obviously have a big UK audience, obviously a big audience in Germany, Eastern Europe, and the US, and further afield. So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of going through that, kind of take us through. So if we're in school together, do you know what I mean? And literally, who was Laura like in school, and who were your early influences, Laura?
Yes. Well, when I was young, I was football mad already quite early on. Who was I in school? I was always busy playing football, outside with my brothers. My dad used to be a pretty good footballer himself, so that's why I started at a very young age playing with them. Who was I at school? I was known for the sporty one, the football. When I was growing up, girls playing football was still quite something new, and so I got. Pretty early on the name of the girl that played football. But I've always been a very vibrant, and kind of out there person. Good at school though. Also a bit of a nerd in the sense that I was getting high grades. But yeah, I was
Okay.
the sporty type playing football every day, all day. And yeah, that's basically what I did during school time. Yeah.
Okay, and where I'm just curious. So, I know, like, kind of growing up in Amsterdam, and obviously my time. I have spent quite a lot of time in the Netherlands. In the last
Mm.
10 years. So, whenever obviously growing up, whereabouts in Amsterdam did you grow up?
Yeah, so it's basically officially it's called Amstelveen, so it's actually next to Amsterdam. It's more a bit of a suburb to it, but it's like bordered on each other. For foreigners, I always say Amsterdam because it's easier to explain. But if anybody in Holland would say Amstelveen, Amsterdam, there's a difference. It's also where my office is now, basically where I work. But it's close next to each other. It's a very neighborhood surroundings. To give you a bit of a background, so I'm Dutch, but I'm half South African as well because my mum is from Cape Town. My dad lived there for quite some time during his
Oh, okay.
youth. So they moved here. I don't know, somewhere in the '90s, begin '90s. So yeah, so I grew up here all my life, but at home, we spoke English. So I'm not the typical Dutch, I would say, but yeah, for me, growing up in an international household in Holland was also quite the experience. But yeah, I know growing up in Amstelveen and in Holland, it's really nice. Everything's very well organized. It's comfortable, basically, so to say. Everything's good. So yeah, and I got
And
the opportunity to play football. So yeah.
I'm just curious. So kind of looking back at kind of at that. So would your parents would they have been a big influence on you growing up?
Yeah, well, in a sense, I mean, obviously my dad is the one who taught me how to play football. He grew up in a family that was more a hockey type, so he was the first kind of rebel to say, "Well, I'm going to play football." He played all through his youth, and he played for Cape Town Spurs, but nowadays is known as Ajax Cape Town. He got injured, so he had to quit, but he taught me the ropes basically. So he was the big influence in my football career, always being very proud and pushing me in there. And yeah, and because my parents obviously they have this international background, they're a big influence in how I considered myself for a long time to be more South African than Dutch. And later on, I'll tell you more about that. But later on, that also influenced some decisions in my career. But yeah, they've been a big driver in the fact of my football career as well. So that's yeah,
And
big drive.
I suppose as well with in terms of when you look at so in terms of like the women's game, but I know the just to mention, so the area you grew up in there, Amstelveen, that's quite near AFC, right? Which is they're the biggest amateur club in Holland,
Yeah,
where
yeah. So
most kids
yeah,
try
so
to go to.
yeah, so AFC, it's funny that you mentioned because they're situated in the south of Amsterdam, which is not too far from here. My dad played for them, and I started with my brothers in Sporting Martinez, and then they both left to AFC because it's a better club for if you want to go higher. And my younger or middle brother, he's actually a really good footballer himself, so he played in the team with like Daley Blind and so. And he was
Oh,
actually
wow,
scouted.
okay.
Yeah, he was scouted for Ajax as well when he was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. But at the time, he didn't. He just wanted to play with his friends. But I remember very well that because my family, like my brothers, my father played at AFC. I also wanted to play at AFC, but I couldn't because it was at the time an all men's and all boys club. So I felt at that time already a bit frustrated, like, okay, because I'm a girl, I'm not allowed to play for this club. But now, fortunately, they have allowed girls, and I was actually one of the I was the first trainer of the women's team at the time when they started. But I'm happy they made that transition. But when I was growing up, it felt a bit weird that I was not allowed to play there because I was a girl. But
Right.
fortunately, things changed.
And you probably were better than the boys then, right?
Well, at the time, yeah. I mean, I remember when I was young, I always played with boys until a certain age, and then they always used to laugh because I was a girl. And then afterwards, they would stop laughing because yeah, I basically beat them. And I always started off in the back, so like center back, right back, and then sometimes on the goal until I was 12 years old, and I decided that goalkeeping was my real talent. But yeah, no, they once they saw that I could actually play, there were no jokes anymore. And my team always respected me, so that was good. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important, and I think that's good that women's football is moving in that direction,
Mm,
100%. And so, so obviously, from starting it with Sporting at Martinez, right?
yeah, Martinez. Yeah.
So if you look, so kind of in high school and stuff, and
Mm.
kind of going through kind of that transition. So obviously, growing up, what was like the footballing culture like in the women's game in the 90s, or what was kind of the attitude pretty much from
Um,
there, from the 90s to like the and what was kind of life like kind of then in like the 90s?
Yeah, so obviously I was still pretty young, but it wasn't general. I mean, I didn't know a lot of girls that played football. I did know about this club called Buitenveldert, where they had a very large women's department and girls department. And I ended up playing there as well for my when I was 13 and 14. But yeah, when I was younger, I didn't see a lot of other girls on the fields. Only when you hit a certain age, you started to get selected for like the regional teams from the KNVB, and then you see all these other girls. But they always used to also play with boys. So the structure that you have now, that there are like girls teams from every type of age and women's teams, I didn't know that when I was younger. For me, that's also a thing. My dad just said, okay, she likes to play football, so she's playing football. There was never an issue, because that's things that I often hear is that girls start playing when they're 14 because they said, yeah, my parents never wanted me to play football. I had to play hockey or volleyball or something else because it wasn't for girls. I'm so happy that my father and my mother just never thought that was an issue, and just actually the opposite. My dad wanted me to play football. He was so proud of me playing football. He saw my
Mm.
talent, and he always kind of pushed that. So for me, I mean, I was, I guess, at that time very lucky because a lot of girls, they didn't. get that opportunity, or they automatically had to do a sport that was considered for girls, like hockey, volleyball, what's it called, gymnastics, those kind of things. So I'm very happy that it turned out differently for me.
Yeah, because I know with in terms of being given those opportunities, and how, like, for example, a lot of those things have changed within the game, and it's great when you see parents that don't stand in their kids' way. Because so would you say, like, with a lot of the players you played with over the years, would you say that they maybe didn't get the support that they did need from parents?
Well, no, actually. So the players that I played for or played with, they obviously had the same situation, right? They were allowed to start from a young age, and I played, I think, with one of or the best players in Holland at the moment, and they all started as young as I did. So that's something we all had in common, and that's why we also made it so far, I think. And a lot of them also kind of paved the way for what is now considered normal. And if I also played with older players when I was younger, and they even had it tougher, because they really had to kind of knock on doors, and they already made way for us again. So you kind of see that things are changing, and it's good to see, and every generation kind of gives the next generation something else, and breaks down barriers, so to say. So that's how it is, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely. It's interesting when I see boys and I see girls in general. Even when you look at women in the workforce, I'm a big believer in that. And I think that they're much more easier to work with. I find that's personally myself, because they're not egotistical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll look at things. They're quite objective. So I think it's a very positive thing. You know what I mean? As which to look at. So so whenever you're actually going kind of coming through there. So obviously your parents being supportive, and so they were supporting you going in. So if we just kind of look through kind of your path. So obviously you left Sporting Martinez, and then obviously you went to but I think you pronounce it and correct me, is in Buitenvelder Veldert, right?
Buitenvelder.
Okay, I just want to make sure I don't destroy the name, but that I make sure I pronounce it correctly.
Yeah.
So explain to me what it was like when you went to Buitenvelder. How was that?
Yeah. So I went to Buitenvelder because I played, I think, when I was 13 or 14, and I knew some girls that played there from the regional teams from the KNVB. One of them being Merel van Dongen. She still to this day is one of my best friends, and we played together with her and her twin sister, and so many others. And we played in an all-girl team. I think the age was ranging from 13 to 16, but we played against boys. That's the reason I went there, because I got more training, and we still played at a high level, and it was a lot of fun for me. It was great to be in a team with all girls that were actually really feisty girls. There were just no pushovers. We beat boys, and we had a great time, and it felt good to be part of that, like this strong girl team that just kind of walked over boys. And I don't know, it felt quite empowering to be part of this. Like, I was not the only girl anymore. That kind of felt good. And seeing how that kind of progressed, and I've always really enjoyed the fact that Miro and I have started this very early on career together, and now obviously I've not playing anymore, but it's good to see her still thriving. That's the one thing I really love, I think, about football as well, is that you make these connections very early on, and to this day you kind of still stay friends, and see each other progress in your careers. So yeah, but no, it was a good experience.
And so whenever so obviously you've moved on here, and because the thing that people don't realize when they think of Dutch football is that Dutch football is obviously there's only two professional divisions if you're looking at the men, but I think it would be the same with the women in terms of professional divisions. So whenever kind of I suppose that transition is happening. How did you find, like, in terms of the amateur, but then obviously then going to ADO Den Hag in 2009?
Yeah, so before I went to, so I went from Buitenvelder back to Martinez for 1 year to play with the boys again, and then I was called by the Serena Wiegman, who's now the national coach, to actually join ADO, but then they had another goalkeeper. So before I joined ADO, I joined their, what they would call their satellite club, which basically was their second team. That was how that was set up those days, which is called Terlede. So I started with them. That was my first real women's team. And that was for me another great experience. I played for them for a year, and then I joined ADO officially. Although I already was training with ADO at the time. Yeah, for me it was how do you say, this confirmation of what I hoped and dreamed. To be called up by ADO at the time was amazing, because they were actually one of the top clubs, and I got to play with the best players at the time. So for me, it was a great learning curve as well. Learned a lot, and really I got to put my first step in the Eredivisie to play my professional game. So for me, yeah, it was a good time. I played 2 years for them. Unfortunately, we didn't win the championship. It was very close. I remember the last year, but no, it was a great experience. I've learned a lot. Met my best friend there, so Leon Stendler, who doesn't play anymore. But yeah, it was football with ADO was a great time.
Because she moved into media, I think you mentioned that to me. Yeah.
She
moved into the media, didn't she?
Yeah, she's not. She's a bit older than I am, so she quit. Also, I think we quit around the same time. But she,
Okay.
yeah, she's now basically one of the analysts for like the NOS and ESPN and that kind of thing. So yeah, she's doing well for herself.
Right. Okay. And did you ever think about going that direction, into the media?
No, not really in particular. I don't think that's something for me. If I've ever thought about pursuing another career in football, it probably would be more in the line of coaching, or like, how do you say? I like the fact the mental part. So you see players, they struggle with a lot of things, and because you've been through that yourself, it would be something of ambition maybe later on in life to kind of help them get through their struggles and kind of get the best out of themselves. But media, I'm not too sure that that's for me.
That's a different strokes for different folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously ADO won. So obviously ADO, they then went on to win the Eredivisie the year after you left.
Yeah.
And what did you think? Did you have some regret, or did you I mean, was there would you say you had disappointment, the fact that did you feel like you achieved pretty much what you wanted to achieve, minus not winning the championship?
Yeah, well, when I left ADO, I didn't achieve exactly what I wanted to achieve. I think I was pretty young at the time. I wanted to become first goalkeeper, and I did that for a while, and then it didn't work out. And then I left for Standard Liege for a new adventure in Belgium, which was a great opportunity. I got to play Champions League. I got to play with Lieke a lot more, which was great, because I love seeing her play. It's amazing. But yeah, no, I never really felt regret. What hurt more was to leave sort of, the team that you knew. Merel joined that year, and I didn't get to play with her at ADO. The championship didn't really bother me that much. I actually thought they deserved it. I was really happy for that team, my friends, that they actually won. And at the time, because I left Standard Luik after half year to go play for PEC Zwolle, and they were at the moment bottom of the league. And for me, actually, that was sort of amazing, because as a goalkeeper, all of a sudden I had so much to do, and I could be the star of every game and really develop myself. I started playing for the national team. So I didn't really feel regrets, because although I left ADO, I did make it to the national team, and I saw progression in my own game. So yeah, actually no regrets there.
Because obviously, so when you went to Standard Liege, what was that? what was that like compared to being at a club like Pek Swala? What was that experience like?
Well, obviously, Standard Liege is a different country, Belgium, and then even in Belgium, it's like the Flemish and the French part, so to say. So even
Right.
that's it's a big culture difference. But I enjoyed it a lot. I think I learned a lot there, but also I think I brought a lot to the table, because one of the things that I think, or I believe I'm really strong in, is this very, how do you say, confident person, and I can bring that to the team. And I noticed that I could give that to other people as well. But I liked to play with them. They're a very professional club. We played the Champions League. But what I didn't like so much is that the games for me were very boring at times, because the team was so strong. Imagine having already a very strong team, and then you kind of get Lieke Martens in your team. Yeah, we annihilated every opponent. So for me, it was just standing like on my own goal, in my 16 or in my box, and just like going, okay, well, we scored another one. So I enjoyed the trainings, because the trainings were of high level,
Right, right.
but the games were just too boring, actually. And that's also why
Do
I decided to leave, actually.
You know, it's so interesting. I was in Northern Ireland before lockdown, right? And I was
Hmm.
speaking, and this must just be goalkeepers. Laura, you can tell me this. And I remember Roy Carroll, who used to play for Manchester United.
Yeah,
I think he had been replaced by Edwin, actually. Edwin van der Sar replaced Roy. And
yeah,
one of the things he said to me, he said when he'd be standing, and nothing was happening, and basically, I think he said he was telling a story where he's playing against Tottenham, I think, and basically I think it was Pedro Mendes hit this ball from like the halfway line, and Roy had to run back. And I said, "Well, what were you doing that?" He says, "Nick, I was bored
yeah.
because
Well,
I was,
it
I
happens.
was, I
Yeah,
was, I was sitting there." And he turned around and he told me that Sir Alex asked him. He said, "Roy, what the heck happened there?" And the ball clearly went over the line. I mean, it really clearly did. And he
yeah,
turned around and he was like, and he just said, "Boss," he said, I felt like I wanted to go for a nap."
yeah. But that happens. That, I mean, if you're like, the better team at a given moment, your
Right,
concentration
right.
kind of leaves you. So yeah, it's kind of boring at a given moment. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's so as a goalkeeper, were you a shouter as a goalkeeper? Were you more quiet? What was your kind of
Um,
personality on the pitch?
I think I really grew into that. I think I in the beginning I wasn't much of a talker, but I really grew into making. In the end days I talked a lot, communicated like very much, um, but it's sometimes hard when you're under pressure. Those are one of the things that you notice. Then it's easy to talk to your defense when the ball's far away and you kind of say left, right, and keep position. But the hard thing about communication is when it all comes to pressure, is close to the goal, and then you have to communicate, keep your own position, try and put everybody in place, and keep an eye on the ball, and trying to, how do you say, anticipate on what the opponent's going to do with the ball. But yeah, I really grew into that role. And now, when I play football, I talk a lot all the time, because I'm constantly busy, like with every moment, every single, trying to steer everyone. But I had to grow into that role.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I've spoken to goalkeepers, and this is one of the common themes I hear, Laura. Maybe you can tell me what your
Mm,
feelings are on this, but and they always say to me that they have to shout to stay focused because sometimes you maybe aren't doing it's different when there's pressure
yeah,
all the time, and I think to be a goalkeeper, they always say goalkeepers have their own gang. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Goalkeepers they're very different to outfield players. They have
yeah,
a very different kind of persona.
yeah. Well, that's what they say, and they're like good analogies and bad analogies about goalkeepers. But no, but yeah, you have to basically how I try to stay focused is, yeah, talking to my defense, but also constantly positioning myself on the field. So I was constantly walking. So when we had these trackers on, I would see that I would walk 6 to 8 kilometers a game, and that is a lot of kilometers for a goalkeeper. People say, but I'm constantly moving, and that's the only way you stay focused and you stay, how do you say, you're constantly busy with the game. Because if you just say, okay, the ball's on the other side, I'm just going to stand here, then you really lose your focus. You're not, there, and the movement keeps me, yeah, focused. And also sometimes just randomly shout at someone. It's fine to keep yourself a bit there. So
uh,
yeah.
yeah, no, I definitely, I know that when I was ever around, whenever I was around people, I know when I was a player, like, and I'd be like shouting at people, and because I think when there is a shouter on the pitch, you know what I mean. I mean, I remember when I took a kid one time, and I took him to Sheffield United. In fact, Harry Maguire, he played
Yeah.
in the same youth team as Harry Maguire, who's now at Manchester United, and one of the things that he said, the academy director, he said, "Flip me, Nick," he said, "This lad, he's a real shouter." He says, "We want to sign him just because of that." Because he was telling players, he says, "Right, flip and get effing get
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there, or I'll effing kick you up and down the pitch." You know what I mean? If
yeah,
you don't, then and the academy manager's like, "Okay."
yeah.
So it's sometimes viewed as it can be a positive thing, not always a negative thing. You know what I
No,
mean?
for sure.
It shows that you have a bit of pride. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
In your own profession and your own craft.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
for sure.
So tell us. So obviously, so once you go from, so obviously being in the national team, and what did you notice from, I suppose, from like your kind of experience there, and obviously playing for clubs like Standard Liege and then Pek Zwolle and then obviously Ajax, and then obviously then you're obviously coming into like the national team. How did how did you find that from in terms of competing against better players, the best players in Holland? How did you find that?
Yeah, so obviously there's a whole, you play in the youth teams from the national teams. And my year, so like 92, 93, and even 91 were like fine wines, so to say. So I always really played with really excellent players. And then when I joined the national team, the first time I was allowed to train, I think I was 18, and I joined when I was 19 for real. Um, yeah, I mean, it was great for me, especially because, the goalkeeper trainer was, great, and it was good to play with all the other goalkeepers. The obviously the intensity, the speed of the game went up. But to be honest, when I played at Ajax, I think we had like 8 national team players. So for me, I
Oh
also
my
got to
goodness.
play daily, on a high level. But yeah, obviously, national team, the thing that you didn't get at the club was the international players. So there were a lot of players playing in Norway, in Germany, in England, and those players came then, during the camps. You got to experience them, and that was a whole nother ball game. And I enjoyed that so much, looking at their talents and their expertise, and also just off the pitch, teaching, how to handle things. And I really enjoyed it. And I mean, obviously, you learn so much. And what I really loved, I loved being with the national team from all age groups, because you're just busy with the same thing. You all have the same motivation, and you're learning from each other, and you're really bonding. And it's really nice to see when, an off the pitch relationship is visible on the pitch. Or perhaps I've had enough players that, off the pitch we have no relationship at, or at least, we're not like best friends, but on the pitch, like, they're my defenders and we're like strong bonded. And that's something I really like about football. So like Daphne Koster was like one of the bigger defenders of her time. Um,
Okay.
and I got along very well with her in the field. We were actually pretty, both very strong-headed, very, how do you say, pretty confident, arrogant, not afraid. And I really enjoyed playing with her, and I think vice versa. So yeah, that's the one thing I really like football. You come in a situation that certain things, don't matter, and it's just this personality that arises, and that really fits well on a pitch. And that's something that the national team was even stronger, I think. So yeah.
So it was, you would say it was stronger than when you were playing club level, because all the girls you're playing with, they're playing in Holland. They're not
Yeah,
necessarily playing outside of Holland.
yeah.
What did you notice? And this will just be great for our viewers to understand as well, Laura.
Mm.
Like, what was the level like when you were playing kind of in England, Germany, Norway, places like that? And I know the football landscape has changed a lot in the women's game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the WSL's got stronger. The
Yeah.
league in America, I'm assuming, is quite strong as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, give us a breakdown of where the game was that you felt at that time with the players that you were competing with, and where they were playing when you were with the national team.
Yeah, so I think the big difference is the tempo. So obviously that they play the balls like a lot harder, faster pace. They move a lot faster. They make faster decisions. So as a goalkeeper, for one, if I had the ball, and I would get direct pressure. If we would play like small games, direct pressure. Whereas if you play at the club, you had less pressure because, not per se that they're lacking, but they're just less driven, I guess, in a way to put pressure on you. And that's what you
Right.
see overall. And they're more fit, right? So at the national team, the players are always fitter than the club players. So
Right.
the intensity is higher. But one of the most important and the biggest difference is accountability.
Right.
Nobody will, if you play a bad ball, that's a bad ball, and you hear about it. They'll tell you about it, and that's what personally I like that. I love it when somebody shouts at me and I can shout back, because it's just about that, right? And it gets you up a notch. And then when you do something well, that's also good. Because it's just you have in Dutch, you have a saying about that, but it's always like it's always sharp. Everyone's sharp, and it's never personal, but it's just eye on the ball basically. And I think that really gets you up a level if you can take that from each other, give each other actual critical feedback on the spot, but also take the accountability. Like, okay, yes, I have to do better, or you should do better. And that's something that at the national team is way higher than at club level.
And so whenever you're looking at it, and you're kind of seeing the level of players, so for you
Mm.
going to the national team was like a really positive experience in your career. So I just want to hit on this. So in terms of, whenever did you ever think about playing abroad? Did that ever cross your mind about leaving the Netherlands and going and playing somewhere else?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, that was actually always my goal, the dream, and it nearly happened. When I left Ajax, um, I didn't have a club at the time, and my manager at the time was kind of phoning clubs and everything, and well, it wasn't going very easy. And then at a given moment, I remember I was sitting in Amsterdam on a terrace, having a drink, and she phones me and she says, "Laura, um, Olympic Lyon wants to see video footage. They're interested in having you." And I didn't know what I heard. I mean, Olympic Lyon is the best club there is. So for them to even know my name and to be interested in me was
Say,
shocking.
say that club again.
Olympic
Say
Lyon,
say the name of the club again.
Olympic Lyon. It's the four, five,
Oh,
six time.
Olympic Lyon. Okay,
Mhm.
wow. Okay, yeah, that's quite a good club. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too
Okay.
bad. So basically, I was like stunned. She said, "Okay, they need some video footage." So I gathered some video footage, sent it over, and I don't know. I think a week later, I was on a plane on to Lyon. I trained with them for a week. All went well. They basically said, "Oh, you have to stay another week," and I said, "Well, okay, fine, but can I go home? I have to get some stuff." Um, I said, "Okay, no, go home. We're going to test someone else." And I thought, well, there, I screwed it up. I thought, shit, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said yes, I'll stay. And but no, so I went home and I thought, wow, it's Olympic Lyon, right? What are the odds? I mean, I did well. It went pretty well. But then my manager phoned me back like a week later, and she said, "Well, Laura, they want to have you. You have a one-way ticket." I mean, 2 days later, I was on a plane, one-way ticket. Arrived there on Wednesday. Pretty tired, and went to like first training was just like me running around the pitch to kind of get fit, and then the next day, because basically what they already wanted to have me. I just had to do 2 matches, friendly matches for the form. But on the first day, I tore off my ligaments in my ankle, in my left ankle on 2 sides,
Oh,
which was the worst what could ever happen to you. And I learned to say in French, "Oh my God, your foot is so blue," because literally I was blue from my toes up into my shin. I had like an elephant foot. I was almost, fainting because of the pain. They kept me for another week to do some X-rays and some scans, but they basically said, "I'm sorry, we want you, but it's going to take too long." So that was actually the beginning of the end for me. It was a very, to be honest, that was devastating, absolutely devastating. It was summer 2016. Um, Going from like this big dream that you had to like instant crash. It was, yeah, it was.
do you think if it hadn't been for the injury, Laura, do you think you would have played on?
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's the whole reason I mean, I would have played for them, somewhere for second goalkeeper a year, maybe 2 years, and then moved on to wherever. Um, but yeah, that basically ended it. I had to go for surgery and everything. So it wasn't. I mean, I still It's still my bad ankle, so to say. I did go to the States in May 2017 for like 3 months. Played the summer league just to see if I could still do it. But I had too much pain, and when I came back, I could go to Anderlecht, play in Belgium, but I had the decision to make: am I going to reach my level that I'm expecting for myself? And I just felt that I wasn't going to, so I made the decision: okay, I can either play football on not the level and always be a bit frustrated about that, or I'm going to make something else of my life, do other things, start working, and find this new adventure. And this is where we are. So yeah.
Right, that's really, really interesting. So obviously, if we look at, so you would say the toughest moment in your career was definitely when you got the injury, because
Yeah.
everything else up till that point had been quite good, had been kind of
Uh,
spotless. You know what I mean?
well, sort of. I had another very devastating injury that at another very crucial point in my career when I was 20. We were going to go to the Euro for 2013 in Sweden, and I was part of we had 4 goalkeepers at the time, and one of us, so I was the third or the fourth. I was actually doing very well. Was supposed to go on, and I always had this bad shoulder because when I was 17 or 18, I had this injury, and always had a bit of difficulties with it. And then I think the first day of training, we were doing penalty shootouts, and I land on my shoulder, and I'm on the ground, and I'm like, that's kind of doesn't feel comfortable, and then I feel it like shooting back. So I thought, oh, that's not good. So I went to my doctor and my physio. I said, well, I think it went in and out, my dislocated. And they said, nah, that's not possible. I said, oh, okay, no, it's not possible, but it does, hurt. So I took a bit of a week rest, kind of continuing, kind of going through the pain, and like, okay, I got to do this. I'm not letting this chance to go to the Euro 2000s of 2003, 13 with this team. I'm not going to, not let that happen. I was going to make my debut. And then I think the last day before we were going to make the selection or tell who's going to be in the team, I land again on my shoulder, and this time it really went out. And I had an operation. I was out for a year. So my second year of Ajax, I was injured. Took me a full year to recover. So that was devastating. But yeah, that also had greater impact. I think that was perhaps greater impact. It wasn't the end, but it did set me back quite a bit. Lost my position at Ajax for a year at least, and then the year after, half in, half out. So since then, I've been struggling with injuries quite a lot in my career, which is a bit of a pain. But on the other hand, yeah, that's part of it, I guess.
Yeah, the injuries, I think people don't actually realize unless you've been through it yourself. And I definitely can relate it because it's not very. I suppose being a part of so just I have a question. Were you a fan of Ajax growing up?
Yeah,
In
100%.
Amsterdam, so you're a big Ajax fan then. Okay.
Everything is yeah.
And tell me this, Laura. So obviously Ajax have a reputation. I mean, for being what I mean, when you look at like the toekomst means the dream. You know what I mean? That's and I think a lot of people they don't actually know that if they don't know kind of what toekomst actually means. But it's an amazing. It's funny because I remember the last time I was at the toekomst, there was a guy. His name was Sonny, and he used to be from. He was from London, and he had a chance sign for Tottenham, Arsenal, and he was over doing a documentary. And when I was there, I obviously got them because I knew one of the coaches, a guy called Percy Van Leerop, and he was actually he's I don't know you're probably familiar with him. You've probably heard his name.
I know the name, yeah.
So he was a trainer there, and it's funny because we were actually having a meeting and we were actually talking about because he had been with the Red Bull group. You see, he had been with Salzburg, but then he had to move back to Amsterdam for personal reasons, And I remember because I think when you come to a club like Ajax, it to me it's very similar when you go to like a Manchester United. It's a very family orientated feeling, but it's also a very political club at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
what was the big draw for you when you were going to Ajax? You know what I mean? As a club that's always progressing in European competition, they're always,
Yeah.
Like they're a very good team, you know.
Yeah. So obviously, Ajax joined pretty late on in the women's game. So when I played for PEC Zwolle, I remember I think it was Leona who called me and she says, "Laura, listen, Ajax is going to start," and I was excited. I couldn't. I mean, that was the dream. For so many of us that grew up in Amsterdam, our dream has always been Ajax. So once they came, I mean, it was amazing. So the great thing is I went from PEC Zwolle to Ajax, and Leona, my best friend, and my other best friend, Ashley Bakker, also came to Ajax. So I got to play in a team with my best friend. I think a couple of years later, Merel joined. We were one of the best teams. Unfortunately, at that time when I played there, we never won anything. We had the great team, but it just didn't. We didn't get any championships, unfortunately. But
It,
joining
didn't
Ajax
get
is
to like
no. I
you
think
didn't get to like the next level. Okay.
we never won a championship at that time. For whatever reasons, but joining Ajax was magical. I remember the first day that we came there. They had all made like this Ajax shirt for us with our names on it. Yeah, it was magical. I mean, just wearing that logo and being part of that club, we're walking on the toekomst. It was amazing. I can't explain, but it feels so good to just finally wear a shirt that you've always dreamed about.